Yeah, so I am Aja Atwood. I'm an engineer by degree, an entrepreneur, a cannabis advocate, cannabis patient, a consumer, daily consumer. And I got into the industry back in about 2014, 2015, when I first started learning more about the plant, the medicinal benefits, not just the recreational benefits. And decided that I wanted to grow in my home. And in Massachusetts, we were able to finally grow at home 12 plants. So got into growing in my basement. But at the time, I was working and traveling a lot for work, where I had to be away from my grow probably for like weeks at a time. So I had everything set up for, automation. I had my lights going on and off. I had my nutrients and everything kind of being controlled. But the one thing I couldn't figure out how to control was the shape and the height of my plant. Because as you may know, growing indoors, you have a certain limitation on how high your plant can get. And you have to train it and kind of spread it out so that you get a lot of light going down on that canopy so you get the most yield from the plant. That takes work. You have to be there every other day or so. So I was trying to figure out, how do you handle that? Couldn't find anything on the market. Found a lot of manual solutions, manual methods, but nothing that could do it while you weren't there. So I got together with another engineering friend of mine, and we co-founded Trella Technologies. So Trella is now a company that has designed a patent pending system that automatically trains a tall plant to grow horizontally, sideways. It does it slowly and gently over time. And it's really designed to get those taller varieties indoors. You can grow your shorter cannabis strains. Typically people say indica, but we've got so many hybrids now, it's really hard to just say that. But you can get those taller strains, or even those mother plants that you want to grow big. You can get those indoors with our system. It's called Trella Grow LST, and you can learn more about that at trellainnovation.com. Trella is Trella, and then innovation.com, all one word. But I also, before I got into this space, I came into this with a background, and it was called natural catastrophe risk engineering. So I was going around to different properties, commercial properties, businesses, power plants, hospitals, just, important, what we would consider to be essential, businesses, and trying to figure out how can we protect those from hurricanes, earthquakes, floods. But in transitioning into the cannabis space and starting to talk with some of my peers, talking to farmers, getting more into the ag space, I also started to see how some of the issues that I was seeing at more of the Fortune 500 commercial properties are also issues that everyday farmers, everyday homeowners are dealing with too. So started to try to figure out, how can I bring that expertise about what happens if we don't get climate correct, if we continue to let the situation get out of hand, if we don't start to reduce our carbon footprint, reduce our our methane, et cetera. These are the types of things that we're going to have to deal with: more hurricanes, more earthquakes, more floods. And what's that going to do to cannabis and all of those farmers that are trying to build legacies, out there, and trying to build companies right now from the ground up? Are they considering the environment 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? So all of that kind of got me to the point where I am now, where I have a concern about the climate and how it's going to impact our food and our plant medicine, and have created Trella Grow LST to try to get more plants indoors and to do it sustainably. But I also have a consulting company as well, climate disaster consulting, to help those people that might want more information on what their exposures might be from hurricanes, floods, et cetera. So that is what I'm up here about in the nutshell. I'm also, on a personal level, obviously I'm a Black American, I'm a Black woman. I identify as queer. And I've been married and out, I've been married for about, we've been together for almost 16 years and married for about 8. So I've been, walking this earth as what would be, an LGBTQ Black woman American, and I'm, happy to be here to share with you my story, but also my perspective with that background as well.
Yeah, so thank you guys for having me here. My name is Johann Balbuena. I founded Balbuena Consulting, and what we do is we focus on licensing, acquisition, and compliance management in the cannabis space. And most recently, I started Synergy, which is a media production company that focuses on creating high quality in-person and VR experiences for the cannabis space as well. We try to focus on helping the communities of color attain their licenses and get their business together and set for the long run.
Yes, my name is Emily Eisen. I am an artist, first and foremost, and I really got into the cannabis industry a few years ago in California, like right before everything went like recreational. So I've been in the industry since like, you know, before all the changes happened. Yeah. But I started out as a bud tender just because I just like love cannabis. It's a passion of mine. And I just, I noticed that in the cannabis industry, at least from my perspective, there was no like artistic, thoughtful, creative, impactful, like imagery, like for brands, like at least like, and especially dispensaries, like dispensaries would just like have like shitty iPhone pics of like whatever new drop they have. And it wasn't like a curated like message, you know? So that's how I kind of got into it. I started doing I turned into the creative director and like social media person for that dispensary. And then from there, I kind of just started working with more dispensaries, and like that's just like a huge privilege that I have, is to be able to proudly and openly kind of go up to people and say, yeah, I work in cannabis. But I kind of have found my positioning less so on like the, you know, like working for different brands, like, and like, you know, giving them all of my creative energy. I've really just turned myself, I think, into like a point person for creativity, diversity, social justice, and just like all these different issues that we really need in the industry. I want to like use my skills and like my gifts and my talents to showcase, you know, all the beautiful people who maybe are, you know, left out of the conversation, don't see themselves in the industry yet. Just, I want to just shine a light on what cannabis culture really is, and who's smoking, who's the most, who's been here the longest, you know, the LGBT people, the Black people, the people of color, you know, who've really been the backbone of this movement for like since forever, you know. I want to just showcase that through my artwork. And since I do have like somewhat of a platform and like connections with brands, like I want to get people, right now I'm focusing on like getting people paid. So it's like when everything started happening, you know, George Floyd, and I mean, it didn't just start happening, but when this became a conversation, especially in the cannabis industry, I just like, I've created a database of a lot of people who, like Black queer folks who want to get into the industry, who I have connections. I can either get them work, or, you know, hire them for my own projects or whatever. So I've just lately been taking a more just like purely like social justice and like art thing. I don't really know, like I don't really know like the title of what I am besides an artist.
I know everyone's been doing a lot.
Well, for me, it's been all about learning. I feel like I have truly taken this time to look within myself to figure out what it is I can be doing to be a better part of not only the conversation that I do feel I have had many times before this became a trendy topic. Unfortunately, I hate to call it that, but it seems like, at least of recently, like we've already been losing momentum, in my opinion, as of recent. Like people are already starting going back to their normal feeds. It's not seeming to be something, in my opinion, you know, with Breonna Taylor's people still not being arrested, like there's still so much injustice out there. So I just feel like it's my job as someone with a platform who's in cannabis, who's very privileged, to use my voice. And in order to do that, I have to listen first. And I have to educate myself. And I just feel like I knew racism existed, of course. I knew my privilege existed, of course, but I had no idea the magnitude of both of those. And I think that journey has been difficult. It's been very just heartbreaking. And I just feel like when you look at yourself and you think like, well, I'm not a racist. I'm not one of those people. And then you do realize that it's a very deep pill to swallow. And it's just something that I ultimately feel like I just have to do better. And so that's what I'm doing. Every day I'm educating myself, trying to order and read books, which is not something I normally do, Mama. I like to look at magazines. She's a picture girl, but you know, it's important that we do the work. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to do it the best way I can. And like you said, there is this intersection of pride. I am an influencer. I do have to post certain content, but what I've discovered through this time is it's so important, not only that I like the product, because that was definitely one thing I always thought about, but what is the company doing to further not only the cannabis industry, but the world at large? And so these people now that I've been partnering with within the last month, that's been something that I've been really crucial about asking. Who are you donating to? You know, what does your staff look like? Does it reflect how you feel, how your company is projecting itself online by hiring me as a gay person to come on and have your rainbow flag and me be like thumbs up, which I've always known as someone who's gay, but now I'm taking it that step further and saying, you know, are you hiring people of color? Like, are you continuing to keep this issue in your heart? Because I think that's what it comes down to. Is I've just done a lot of heart work. And it, like I said, it just starts with you individually. And I just try to tell so many people that it's so easy to look at our friends and be like, well, she's not doing this and I'm over. It's like, that's not what this is about. This is about what you can do to help all of our brothers and sisters. Of course, specifically, I have to shout out the trans brothers and sisters in the Black Lives Matters movement.
100%. And these specific times, I mean, as you guys know, this is not a new situation. It's just been magnified because at which point do you literally start making those changes like radically in order to make a disruptive change that actually you know, influences others to make the change, and then create a community that, you know, everybody feels safe, and in the skin of your color, the color of your skin doesn't play an impact in that. So in these times, these particular times, San Diego, we are still very active. Just this past weekend, we had a huge march. I didn't go to this one. I did go to one a couple of weeks ago, and I'm telling you right now, in that situation, as I'm marching, you know, and chanting and demanding justice with my brothers and sisters here in San Diego, of all colors, I should say. So it was very inspiring. I did see that change is going to come, because this generation that's what they're about. Can we curse you? They give zero fucks, and they want things to change. So they are here marching, you know, holding hands, you know, strangers, getting on their knees, screaming, you know, these people's names that have been, whose lives have been taken for significantly, like nothing. We don't even, for no reason, we can actually safely say. So I do think that platforms like this also showcase the fact that we're having these conversations, whether people, you know, stop posting or, you know, come back to their regular lives. I mean, they have to, because honestly, this shit's depressing, guys. So still, you know, keep an eye on the movement and do what you can, starting, you know, from where you are. Like, for instance, Ganja was here saying about, he knows that that he needs to be educated. So that's his starting point. For me, as a person of color, when and I hope I addressed you correctly.
Doesn't matter, I take both pronouns, so you're all good, as long as it's said with love, which clearly it is.
Absolutely, thank you so much for understanding. So as I was marching, for me as a person of color, and as an immigrant, as an LGBT member, I also thought to myself, I was on that same wavelength of, what can I do? Because I'm sick and tired of the shit. Like, what can I do? Because if you focus on what's not in your control, you're going to get overwhelmed. And as I was marching, I was kind of getting a little bit overwhelmed. And I just started to hone in on what can I do? What can I do before I go crazy, you know? And in my perspective was, okay, my industry is the cannabis industry. Social justice there is social justice for people of color.
Sure.
And what I can do is continue to help my community build foundations that will create long-lasting change to build our own economies, you know, to rely on ourselves and not have to focus on begging people to change their minds or wanting people to change their minds, but just continue obviously to hold hands, you know, with you guys and our allies and demand, you know, that our society changes, but at the same time, starting to create change within our own communities. So we don't have to be, so most of our time is not spent playing the defense. Let's start playing some offense. And that's,
Love that.
You really think about the way that racism has been ingrained and programmed into all of us. So I would say there's racism in the Black American community. I had to deal with my own internal racism and my own issues. When you grow up as a young kid, no one teaches you as a Black kid, you know, what your history, past slavery. You don't learn about all the things that our ancestors did before they actually got to this continent. You have to learn all that stuff after, if you're interested, or if you're even, you know, aware enough to pick up the book or to read or to YouTube and learn about it. And that goes not just for Black Americans, but that goes for everybody. The entire population. There's racism everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And each of us, despite the fact that you might be a part of a marginalized group, you may be a woman, so you feel like, oh, I get it. You don't. You might be gay or, you know, trans, and you think you get it. You don't. You really have to do some reading and some work to learn about how deep it is. So yes, when we're in, you know, different conversations with some of our, you know, lesbian and gay, you know, peers, they may have biases. They may say things that you're like, you might not want to say what you just said. But again, it's across the population. So yes, it is in that population too.
We cannot deny the fact that in our Black communities, still there's a lot of stigma with respect to the LGBT community, you know, to it being openly, even, you know, I can tell you as a member of the LGBT community, I've been with my partner for 7 years, and she's Filipino. Even in her family, like it's a thing in people of color's culture still. We're still fighting that battle, not only, you know, including our trans, the entire community, our trans brothers and sisters, but there's that gray area there, that there's a fight that's being fought, you know, parallel. So we're still fighting that fight. But the LGBT community has come out for Black Lives Matter. You know what? The LGBT community, since we're so diverse as well, like we come out and support everybody because we are in every community. We are the community.
If you want to see the most diverse community, look at the LGBTQIA community. Hello.
You know, when it comes to being a Black American, that's something that is obvious, and I carry that no matter where I go, whatever I do. That is something that, you know, that physical characteristic is something that presents itself to the world despite. However, being a queer woman, I can kind of mask that if I decide to, or if I just happen to by accident. I can change the way that I dress, I can change the way that I present myself to the world. And I've noticed that, you know, over time, most people seem to have more of I get more of a response about my skin color than I do about my sexuality, especially in cannabis. When I first got into the industry, two of the women that I met that I'm still friends with are both Black women, but they're also both identify as bi and queer. So we've all kind of had these experiences more as Black women than we have as being identified as, you know, LGBTQ.
Well, I mean, obviously my answer is gonna look a lot different than like someone else's answer, especially because I am a white woman. I mean, I'm Jewish, and like, you know, as you know, like we also gone through our own shit, but I don't think like, I mean, I'm white. I mean, like I enjoy every aspect of white privilege, you know, Jewish, it doesn't mean European, but it's like a whole thing that I'm getting so sidetracked. I'm fucking high, sorry. Anyways, I think it's just like, you as a white presenting woman, like I can absolutely not go around like shouting gay rights if I'm not acknowledging that, number one, the LGBT movement was literally created by Black and brown trans women, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. Like they are the pioneers of this movement. So as fucked up as it is with like coronavirus and everything, and not being able to have pride or whatever that means, like all these parties thrown by these like huge corporations, it's like that, it's just like a party, or it's just like, it's not productive in my opinion, especially when large corporations are involved, excuse me. And this pride is so different because there's no events, you know, and I think it's honestly kind of drowned out. It's like weeded out who's really here for us, number one, which has always been ourself, and also acknowledging that the Black Lives Matter movement is the LGBT movement right now. Like it always has been, but like especially now, like the communities are coming together, and it's like acknowledging that it's like we would not be here without Black folks, specifically Black transgender folks. So I think the Pride movement this year has taken on like a new energy, and I'm here for it. I'm sorry that it had to come to these circumstances for us to like really show up, you know, for the Black Lives Matter movement, but like we're here now, and I think it's gonna be good for both communities in the long run to like unite. But we can't keep having these like rainbow washed, like whitewashed, pink washed, like corporate pride. So that's my personal stance on everything.
Yeah, I guess for me, I feel like it's just the first year that it's really felt like a movement and not a party. I echo that. And I also really want to echo what you were saying earlier too about it really does feel like we're on the brink of change. And I feel like, again, as someone with a platform, it's just so important to continue to push that, like continue to push that this is a movement. And even though Pride Month is about to end in a week, it does, this feeling, this energy, this vibe, it doesn't have to end. I mean, I think those of us in the community, we celebrate Pride every day, our whole life. So it's awesome that we have a month to really celebrate it with the world, but we continue on being proud after this month. So we should continue on with the BLM movement and with our togetherness that we have, you know, created during this pandemic. And I don't know, I think again, personally for me as an artist, as much as this pandemic was difficult, I chose to look at that challenge as fun as an artist and really pushed myself outside of the box and tried to create art that I couldn't create naturally in a nightclub or in a Pride space. And I've loved that because it's allowed me to, again, be more introspective, look at myself and ask myself as an artist, what am I doing? Is this work actually making people feel, or is this just, you know, my influencer job that I'm earning a check for? Or is it, you know, I have to put things in places and make sure that they're all evening out now, because that's my duty as someone who cares and genuinely wants to be a part of this. So yeah, that's how I feel about that.
I was just gonna add to that, the fact, I think that the coronavirus situation was the perfect ingredient for us to have our attention on what's really going on and what really matters. Yep. So, you know, George Floyd, before George Floyd, there was another person that had been murdered like a week before. George Floyd's situation happened at a point in time where everyone and their mother had their phone in their hands. So if you saw that video, at that point, you literally saw murder on your screen. And I think a lot of people were already nervous about the whole coronavirus, not knowing whether this is real or fake. It's a glitch in the system. It's a nightmare. It's a dream. Nobody knew, you know, we were all of us, I'm sure, in this room were focusing on our creative, so we didn't go crazy and focused on bad stuff. But this you could not ignore. It was everywhere. And at that point, you know, combined with the fact that people were home and wanting to get out, it was just, no, I'm going to go fight. It's either fight or stay home and feel like I'm not doing anything or contributing, you know. And as human, we are, despite, you know, we have those prejudice traits and things like that, we also are creatures of expansion. So being home, at that point, you wanted to contribute to something. And fortunately enough, it was Black Lives Matter. Unfortunately, you know, the situation was magnified, showing that we have a lot of work to do. But the work, it's starting, you know, it's and I think right now it's for real this time. Like we're gonna take matters into our own hands, and more people are becoming educated and want to be allies and not defending, again, like not playing the defense and defending Black people or people of color, but actually, my lamp keeps going on and off here, I apologize. But actually educating their own people, you know, because there you're playing offense, you know, in talking to your own team and trying to change, you know, that perspective. So I think now that we're doing something different, you know, approaching things in a different way, the change is gonna come.
I find that some people may not understand the history or how deep that war on drugs, like the impact that it really had from a multiple generation perspective, and not just in areas that are right now being disproportionately impacted, but outside of those areas, because that impact travels outside of a geographical region. So, for example, if I can share a story, if I have time. So, you know, as a Black American, my great grandmother moved from Savannah, Georgia to Philadelphia. And she was business savvy. She was around that, what we call Reconstruction era. So she had a little bit of business savvy. She had people that she saw that looked like her that were able to actually, you know, have their own businesses. So she took that with her to Philadelphia, and she was able to get to the point where she owned 3 properties in South Philadelphia. So that was back in like the 60s and the 70s. For a Black woman to own 3 properties in South Philadelphia wasn't common, but it did happen. And she happened to be one of those individuals. And when she passed away, she gave each of those properties to each of her granddaughter. So each granddaughter received a property. That was in the 80s. And that was during the height of what was the crack epidemic, the war on drugs. You know, cannabis it wasn't all of it. We also, you know, had other drugs that were impacted as well. And the police just came into our neighborhoods, and we, you know, and you have to understand the history of it. Black Americans, some of us, especially the Congressional Black Caucus, were for it. We asked for policing to come into our neighborhoods to try to control the crime. However, we just didn't know the impact that it would have. And what happened was you had not just crime, but you had fear. You couldn't go outside, didn't really trust the police. The police came in with a very militant and very, you know, physical dominating, you know, perspective about trying to clean up everything. And they treated everyone as the same. They didn't treat you as, okay, this is someone who's actually maybe doing crime, and this is someone who lives in the community. Everybody got treated the same. Calling a cop when you had a problem in the neighborhood, they were not showing up. Like, this is the type of environment that each of those homes that my grandmother owned went through. So the property values declined because people didn't want to live there. And people started moving out, and things became vacant and dilapidated. So that value, that property value that could have been used for leverage for another project or for college or for someone to be able to do something in each of our 3 families, was wiped out. And to the point where the property wasn't worth the value, and the properties were sold or just, you know, not kept up. So, there's a lot to that, but that's just my family. And we had, we didn't have an issue where we had someone who was arrested, but when you talk about that, removing, a father or a brother or a mother from a family structure, you're actually taking away, not just the economic value that that person had for that family, but you're taking away support, love, community. And that affects not just that person, but it affects their children, and it affects, everyone in the household. So this over policing that we're seeing now still, that has a history back from the slave era, from overseers that are now called officers, it is something that has been systemically damaging Black Americans' ability, I think, to prosper on this land. And cannabis was one of those things that kind of, started to show people that. But I think, the recent police brutality, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, all of that, like, is also, things are coming to a head. And we're glad to see that people are actually starting to pay attention to it. And we hope that people continue to pay attention to it.
Cannabis saved my life. I'm also, I served in the military. I'm a prior Navy, go Navy. And I experienced an accident, came out with PTSD. In my family, cannabis is a drug. Your brain will melt if you know what I'm saying, if you take that. And I did it in college a few times, but I always felt sleepy. So I always wonder why people would smoke weed at a party, because I wanted to go home shortly after. But a person introduced me to cannabis for medical purposes, and, it changed my life. It literally brought me back from being in a mental fog from the time I left the military for up at 6 months thereafter. And I was like, what is this? I need to work to change that stigma. Like, this is medicine. This can change people's lives. This can help so many people mentally, physically, emotionally. I mean, what else do you want from this planet? It can disrupt the plastic industry. I started reading. So that's my advice there, to answer your question, is educate yourself, because this is a powerful thing. Once you are educated and you know that you want to do this for the right reasons, because this literally can help our world, the environment, the healthcare system, it can help in so many ways, then I'm pretty sure you're going to get that struck from lightning, and you're going to know what you can contribute with your own, whether you're an accountant, whether you are an artist, whether you're creative, whether you are a business entrepreneur, whether you have money, whether you have no money, but you want to be a caregiver. You can do anything in this space. And give me a call. I'll put you on. And we can talk about it. There's so many ways that you can get in. I mean, every single one of us here is in the space and does something completely different. Right. So just align what you bring to the table with, the real, and why this product is so important to us as human beings, even our pets, and then combine those two and see what you can get. Look, that's what we all did, I think, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, you just said that perfectly. I mean, what really is there to add to that? I agree. I totally came into this industry because I thought it was medicine, and it is medicine, So exactly. That's what led my passion to give voice. So I agree so much with what you said.
Yeah, I agree. I you literally articulated that so beautifully. I think for everybody, one thing I wanted to highlight about what you said is I have noticed that I have been in this long enough that I've seen the evolution of who comes into this for the right reasons. And I think greed in this industry is the #1 killer. I think that getting into it for the right reasons is everything, because I've seen, $1 million CEOs that have come into the cannabis industry and completely failed, and it's because they don't care. Like, they don't care about the movement, they don't care about the people, they don't care about the culture, they literally just care about the money. So I would say greed, don't get into it for like greed, or because you think you're gonna like make a lot of money, or you're gonna just like get free weed all the time, you know?
Because you will, but for the short run, like it will happen for a few months, and then when your clout goes away, your foundation is weak.
Exactly.
Yeah, clout is, it's like, I mean, I think we can say this because it's just a fact that, you know, there's influencers out there. I'm not gonna like name any names, but like they have like shit ton of followers, like almost like, you know, 500,000 followers, whatever. But all they do is just like take 50 dabs in a row, and like, you know, there's no substance, like, at least in my opinion. So I just think your heart has to be like in it for the long term.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, we're lucky because we're in a state where you can do this, and you know, not have to really hide and be you know, on the low about it. So take advantage if you're in a state where you can grow your own if you can.
It was a pleasure as well. Thank you for being allies. Thank you, you know, for having this platform and coming together and show, you know, the different faces of the cannabis industry, the different faces of the LGBT community. It's necessary, and we're definitely paving the way for the you know, these younger generations. But these guys, they're all about it. They're here for environment. They're here for civil rights. They're here for, you know, the LGBT community as they're here for equality, and I'm so proud. I'm so proud.
Thank you so much for having me, and I think this was like better than I even expect. I didn't know what to expect, but this was just like an honestly like great conversation. I feel good, so thanks for having me. Love you all. Nice to meet everybody.
You too.
And, yeah.
Exactly. I'm so proud. I can't wait to see what happens. Let's keep working together, learning from each other, and loving one another. And thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to speak. I think it's been a great conversation, and I hope one that will help enlighten others and keep it all moving forward.